IVM.
Hi everybody, just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
All right. So you're at home.
1 second. Let me make a filter for us.
My God, what was
for
that
our
filter?
listeners? They are all terrible. Why can't they figure out good filter? Do you feel okay? You don't do selfies though, do you?
I don't do selfies, as in? Of course I do selfies.
I follow you. I've barely ever seen. I know.
I don't post very often, but I do selfies.
I am one of those people where I am now at least a little nervous before taking a selfie if there is no filter on.
Oh, I don't use filters at all. I've embraced the whole idea that if my skin's imperfect, it's imperfect. Like, let me, to the point. Yeah, see, zit.
We have similar zits.
Yeah,
Karan
exactly.
Arjun.
Yeah.
Anil Mukesh.
To the point that my phone has a fantastic filter. Like, it just blurs all these imperfections out. I refuse to use even that because I'm like, no, I don't want to buy into that. Because once you start, it's just like this. It fucks your self-worth. Yeah.
And the reason I said it, I don't know if it's reached that point where it's fucking up my self-worth, but it's definitely reached a point where I'm like, oh my, I'll give you an example. Yesterday I met a friend of mine and before I said bye to him, I was like, oh my God, we don't have a picture together. So let's take a picture. And his rickshaw was here and ready to leave. But I took forever to figure out which filter to use. And I was like, I could have just taken a picture and, he could have sat in the rickshaw and buy, right? But it became like a thing, dude. No, not this filter. No, this doesn't look good. No, this. And then I was like, who am I?
For me, I've there's so much I struggle with, just feeling not beautiful or feeling not attractive enough that it's one of those small steps that I want to eliminate any of these things that distort and supposedly enhance that. I don't want to use that as a crutch.
Yeah.
What I see every day, I want to get used to what I see every day.
Yeah.
If I get a zit, it's all right. I don't want to hide it. Let me see it and get used to it. So, yeah.
Holistic too.
Yeah, I mean, small things. Therapy helps. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you been updated? But oh my God, I know what I want to talk about. I've been very conflicted. I was on my way to Bombay a week ago. I was on the bus and I was like, what do I watch? And then actually, no. I'll tell you what. I was packing my bag for Bombay. Okay. And the thing was, whatever I was watching ended and automatically Netflix started playing something. And because I was packing, I wasn't paying much attention. But turns out it was the Dave Chappelle special that everyone the
special.
Infamous Dave Chappelle, even his previous sons, all of them have been trashed. And because I was like, okay, whatever, I'll change it. But let me see where this goes.
What's your point of view on it? Like, where do you stand on it?
Okay, the jokes are terrible. Okay, the jokes are bad. I won't say terrible.
All jokes?
No. There's some really funny moments.
That's the thing. That's the thing that makes it important to have a conversation, because it's important that we don't take one entire special and one entire comedian in entirety and say, oh, let's cancel. It's important to see there are parts of this which we don't agree with. But then there are parts, he talks about race and he talks about racism and classism, and the commentary he makes on those things are so incisive and deep.
But debunked, everything he says, which is looked at as problematic, is embedded in his overall discourse about race throughout the...
Yes. Yeah.
So I just felt, again, there were a lot of... And here's the deal. Somehow, without wanting to, I've ended up watching it twice after that, because then I was telling my friend about, oh my God, I kind of enjoyed this Dave Chappelle special, and I can never say that out loud because, lynching ho jayega. And he was like, oh, I've been meaning to watch it. So we saw it together. I was like, sure, even I want to see it a second time. And then I met another friend who was like, dude, have you seen it? I was like, oh my God, okay, fine, I'll watch it a third time. And here's the deal. Each time it got less funnier to me. Each time the problematic parts actually came to the fore for me. But none of them were like the trans-related stuff, like or people. I still did not find that problematic.
I find it super problematic. When someone says I'm Team Turf, I'm sorry, that's that's problematic.
Okay, here's the deal.
That's when. So
here's the deal. You've taken a sentence, he said. Okay. Again, and I'll tell you what's happening here. A lot of the anger revolving around here is taking something he said without zooming out. If you see why he said I'm Team Turf in that particular moment.
Absolutely, I get it. But there is also a history with this person.
Sure. A history. And first of all, I want to establish the fact that he obviously is a person with a very limited point of view, and it's only in his purview and what he finds funny. So I get in how many ways this was a problematic session, but I thought I was more offended by the feminism stuff and the Me Too movement and all. I was more like offended by some of the jokes there. Plus, they were like cliche jokes, nothing fresh there. But this overarching story, which the main reason why our trans folks are very pissed off with him is because he used, and this is a spoiler in a way, but the way he used a trans friend of his to kind of make a point. But when I saw the special, when he suddenly talks about, it's a spoiler alert, I'm just going to say it, but I felt a little like I was watching Hannah Gatsby all over again. You know that particular point in Hannah Gatsby where it's all fun and you're laughing and everything, and shoot, suddenly she like just hits you out of the dark with something dark and you are like, what the fuck just happened? And you're suddenly stunned.
No, but what justifies it for you? What justifies the transphobic jokes for you?
What? No. I'm talking about how he led it up to the fact that, hey, you can call me a transphobe as much as you want, okay? But you will never rob the fact that I am very aware. I am more about the human experience, and I understand the human experience and the plight of the human experience. I know how that sounds. I won't do it justice because I've not done the special.
That's the thing. That's the thing for me. So which is where you know the way I'm coming at it from is the fact that there is one special and there are multiple jokes sort of attempted, and there are jokes that are searing commentary on something that he's really good at, which is race. Anything that has to do with race. The limited purview, which I kind of find offensive, is to say that there is a race struggle and then there is a sexuality struggle. And his point, which I kind of found grating, was that the sexuality trouble that you guys are talking about is seeing the light of day only because white people have that struggle too. Otherwise, it wouldn't have seen the light of day. And for me, that's so idiotic because the trans community, the first community within trans communities in America that kind of faced this entire issue was the African American community. So which is why there is such a huge conversation about intersectionality. And to say that these are watertight compartments, to come from that point of view is so uneducated and so backward. And that's what pisses me off. And then to follow it up with, so I'm Team Turf. It's like saying, rape is no big shit. Doesn't fucking matter.
She kind of said in some, he'd not say that.
So here's no. I'm saying, giving an example. I'm saying, doesn't matter what I follow it up with or what I back it up with. When I come to that kind of a statement, I'm sorry. That's just bloody backward. And then on top of that, the shit that Netflix is trying to pull. I mean, after all the, goodwill that it's garnered with the kind of campaigns that they do, the shows that they do, to say, no, you know what, at least they could have had a better PR response. This was such a bad...
And they fired an employee.
No, so they suspended the employee and she's back now.
Okay.
Obviously, also, there is this case of so many things being blown out of proportions in different, in isolation.
The director of Dear Young People, that's the show.
Justin Simien.
She refused.
She.
Who I also believe refused to direct the next season. She said she won't until Netflix takes accountability and takes it off. And here's the deal. Again, this is a conversation of its own, I feel, in a lot of ways. But if I had to sum it up, I don't feel bad that I enjoyed it. I do feel
you shouldn't.
Everyone's anger is justified, but I kind of somewhere made sense to me the larger point he was trying to make. And here's the deal. It's also one of those things where I read the articles, I read the Reddit subreddits about why did I enjoy this, and what views are people putting out there. And the more I read, the more I realize that actually I should have a problem with this special too. So I don't have it right now, but I'm educating myself.
No, so again, like my bottom line is this, where I have come to a point where I can criticize something and like something that is as expansive as a 2 hours, like a 1.5 hour special, similar to Friends. I mean, there are things that I absolutely despise about Friends, but that doesn't mean that I'll boycott Friends. There are things that I would expect the writers and the producers to come out and say, and they have said a lot of things which talk about, if it were in today's day and age, if it were remade, there would be a lot of things that were different. So that's...
In fact, I remember after that, I saw the 3 other specials just to get a sense of why he's sort of developed this transphobe kind of label and all of that. And I don't know. What I feel over time is that maybe he's new to me as a comedian. I used to watch the Dave Chappelle shows when it was a thing, but those are skits or whatever. But like now as a stand-up comedian, this is the first time I'm seeing and stuff. And I guess I'm just new to his delivery of the way he delivers. He's good at that. So maybe I find that funny, but the joke itself is funny.
I mean, similar to Louis C.K., right? Like I will still keep accepting the fact that I like his humor. I mean, I can't...
I can't change my mind. I try so hard, I can't. In fact, I saw all of Louis this year again.
I mean, the man's a genius. Sure, what he did was despicable, but then that doesn't change the fact that he's a fantastic writer, fantastic actor.
Yeah. If you see his previous specials, I'm talking about Dave Chappelle. He has an entire segment on Louis C.K. about what.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah,
and it's quite funny. I don't.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Anyway, that's news enough for today.
Please don't kill me, guys, for even hinting at the fact that I like the Dave Chappelle.
There's a lot of discourse I got on.
There was silence, and I said it on Clubhouse yesterday. Suddenly there was silence.
No, one second. The last 2 weeks, I've gotten so many messages. I mean, some heated messages, but a lot of let's talk about Taylor Swift and why you don't think Taylor Swift is as amazing as Lady Gaga. We'll come to that. Let's discuss that in a bit. But yeah, let's get back in a moment and let's start talking about what we want to talk about exactly for the episode.
Hey everybody, it's been a great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On the Storytellers and Storysellers podcast, Vineet talks to the youngest gaming creator, Ujjwal Chaurasia. He shares his content strategy and how he went from his first 1,000 subscribers to 20 million on YouTube. On Simplify, Shrikesh is back after 2 years in Kuala Lumpur. The gang ask him about the differences between the two countries, work-wise, culture-wise, and infrastructure-wise. On the Edges and Sledges Cricket podcast, Varun, DJ, and Ashwin discuss CSK winning its 4th IPL title, the beginning of the T20 World Cup, and India's squad. Monica Halan has a new book, Let's Talk Money. You've worked hard for it, now make it work for you. She joins Anupam on Pesa Vesa and they discuss the ins and outs of the book. And on All Things Policy, Aditya Parikh talks to Serbian journalist and geopolitical analyst Nikola Mikovic about the impending hostilities between Serbia and Kosovo. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, Slay Coffee, Intel, Kotak Mahindra Bank, and Oxfam India. Thank you so much for making this possible.
And we are back.
I need a quick honest answer. Whenever you do Google Meets, any work calls or whatever, I just realize I only look at myself. Do you do that too? I'm just asking. Do you actually look at the other people? Like, obviously, you glance all over.
No,
I think if I had to put a percentage, 90%, I just look at myself in any call.
No, I do both.
So now one second. Now I'm looking at myself. Now I have to look at you and ask that. But like, to you, where does it look where I'm looking? So
it's looking like you're looking away. It's very difficult to figure out whether you're looking at me or not. Because, so for example, I've shifted. So wait 1 second.
Wait, now I'm looking at you.
So I'm looking at you right now.
Okay.
But I shifted my screen and now I'm looking at you. So it can.
Okay.
I can change that around. So you will.
Okay. It's not obvious that I'm looking at myself. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And especially if it's not a one-on-one, then it's very clear. It's not clear at all. If it's a one-on-one, only two people, and obviously you're not shifting screens, then it's very clear that you're.
Done.
If like either you're looking at yourself or you're not. So
amazing.
But anyway,
What is it, Shanitra? Why have we arrived on the topic we've decided today?
we have arrived on the topic because reality checks and just asking ourselves and not feeling bad about the idea that everyone faces rejection. Like I remember there was a conversation between a couple of days back. A couple of friends, we got together, we were chatting, chilling, this and that, and it turned out, so we were talking about, so who would be immune to rejection, and it really is no one, because as we were going round, we were talking about who we would we would never reject and we would definitely reject.
Reject in what sense?
Like let's say dating, like in the dating sense,
okay.
where a lot of your self-worth is kind of trapped in. And there was this question where, so what if the most perfect man and the most perfect woman, so to say, physically, and two of us, we said we would reject them because that's just not our type. So technically there's someone who will reject someone, anyone, it's under the sun. It's a circle. So
sometimes I when someone says interested, they ask you on Grindr. Someone says, they send hi, then 4-5 pictures, and then they say interested. And I feel like I owe it to anyone if I'm not to. First of all, I don't say not interested. I find that a little harsh as a framing, as a sentence.
Absolutely.
So I just say, hey, happy hunting, TC. Usually I'll just nothing, no negative words in, But sometimes guys just suddenly switch when you say that. Oh, attitude. Oh, this and that. I just want guys like that to know that, you just made me happier that I fucking, don't be that person. I just got happier that I said no then. But rejection is it's funny when we do it to other people, but it keeps happening to us also. But again, I have to say, now having rejected enough people and having been rejected enough number of times, this is the lay of the land. I've just accepted it for what it is. Like if someone even says no to me, I don't take it personally.
Of course, yeah.
There was a time where I would have.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Was there a point of time? What were those things that would kind of, really dig deep and sort of burrow into your self-worth? What kind of rejection?
The obvious ones are age and weight. Obviously for me, because not that that might be the reason that someone is rejecting me, but it's like, when someone says no, in your head it automatically is, because maybe I'm, that happens first of all. And secondly, obviously, sometimes I see, explain something to me. In a Grindr bio, when you see tribe, okay, and it says whatever, twink, otter, daddy, whatever, does that mean that person is interested in those certain things, or they are a part of that?
What my understanding is, they are a part of that.
They are a part of it.
Yeah.
So a lot of times,
what tribe do I belong to? That's my understanding.
Sure. So a lot of times, let's say someone's profile says fit, and they've not responded to a hi or a hello, and so it won't take 2 seconds for me to quickly assume that, obviously this person is looking for a fit person. I am not a fit person. I am not a muscular person. I am not a thin person. Because people say specifically those things, right, in their bio, looking for lean, fit, Sometimes people say, looking for someone to go to trek with, and I only reject them. Like, fuck it, I'm not a person who's going to go trekking anytime soon. Do you remember that episode in Schitt's Creek where Patrick takes... I related to David so much because I am exactly that person. I would complain the entire... Like, what, a hike? You want to go for a fucking hike? Like, what? And in fact, because it's a TV show, it mellows out in the end, like everything works out. But I would be grumpy even in you did all of this because you wanted to get engaged to me? Shut the fuck up. Next time, parking lot bhi chalega. That's not, but don't make me walk. But I feel like I'm very quick to immediately, I have to say I was very quick to, because I am lacking in something, that's why. But now I've kind of, if someone says no, I'm just, okay, happy hunting, take care, sweet, TC, And sometimes I've noticed when you do that, they still then want to chat. Like, okay, if you don't bhav, or whatever, Because some people really are on Grindr. Let's say they ask you interested and you say no, and then they start asking you why. And
no, I mean, what kind of see? I try my best to kind of make sure that this internet dating space, whatever conversations and communication I put out there, none of that has a tinge of like negativity. Like I really try hard.
Yeah.
So as a result, like you said, I never say, hey, not interested. Also, I'm not very regular. And if I'm not very regular, sometimes, I'll just log in at like 7 a.m. in the morning and then just like not check. And then 2 days later, I'll check like this ream of messages from someone where they've sent 1 picture, 2 pictures, 3 pictures, and then said, oh, so not interested. And then like an angry message saying, if you're not interested, at least let me know. I'm like, I don't fucking owe anyone anything, just the way you don't owe me anything.
I'm glad you said that, because I used to be that person where I won't respond. But I very recently, I did not know if this was always a feature. I very recently started noticing there's a tiny sent, delivered, and read. Now it says like if the person's read your message. So at least you know if the person's read your message or no. Yeah. Like, so I know that if someone's read my message and they've not responded, fine. I'm not going to like keep hounding them. And also I want to specify that before I used to be the person like, okay, I just won't respond, if I'm not interested. But now, not because everyone was like, oh, you did not even reply if you're interested. No, I just make it a point to like, hey, I mentioned, hey, sorry, because I guess also more often than not, I just see Grindr as such a singular function. It's a singular function for me, right? Like, which is, okay, I'm just going for, maybe I'm horny or I want to hook up.
Yeah.
So more often than not, the ones I say not interested are actually people I would love hanging out with, because they are the brainy ones and the nice ones and all. They might not be my type. But, I there's some sort of disparity in my own head, which I've never been able to figure out. I don't know if I'm doing it right. But I know now it's like, it's a flow. Now it's not like, oh my God, no, this person said no, I wish they would have not said no. I don't feel any of that. It just stays. It's quick. It's quick, and I move on very quickly. And I hope other people were also like that, or they'll get like that eventually once they've done the Grindr drill.
Have you ever felt like? Have you ever experienced rejection from like queer cliques?
Like cliques, like
cliques, like queer cliques, like gay men and groups.
No,
experienced.
First of all, I have not actively like been a part of gay groups or like put myself in like I have gay friends groups like that. You mean?
Yeah, cliques like.
No, I like to think I'm pretty lovable. Yeah. I'm not sorry, but yeah, that's the truth. I've not. Have you? Like, explain like how?
No, as in I don't really have like a group of gay friends. I have individual gay friends, so I've not really experienced that, but I've seen a lot of people experience. So in one case, it wasn't necessarily me being rejected, but people distancing me because I kind of slept through them, like. And it's kind of justified. I get it. Like, so
basically, you slept with everyone in the group. So,
and I mean, so in my defense, a lot of them had slept with each other. So it started with one of them, and then and it's not like I was playing everyone, it started with one of them and I was introduced to the group, and then we stopped because he was going through his own thing, so I didn't kind of continue. And then another person,
but this was a group of friends. And you entered this friend group?
Yeah. So I got introduced through, so let's say there's like person 1, person 2, person 3, person 4. Person 1, we kind of got hot and heavy, and we spent time, and we had a lovely time with the group. I was introduced to the group, so I became kind of this like supporting character, like guest role, in this group, guest appearance in this group. And then like this person turned out to be a little bit of a flake over time, and like there are things like I'd invited him over to my house and I'd made dinner and this and that, and he just like didn't respond that entire day, that the next day. And that kind of fucking pissed me off. You don't do that when someone's really like expecting you. So I mean, I figured that this person has some like isn't at the same place that I am at.
Mm-hmm.
So the friendship continued with other people in the group, and the friendship continued with him also. And I made it clear that, you know, I'm friends with you, but I don't think I can continue this with you.
Yeah.
And then person 2 was someone we kind of started getting close. Like, it's not like I had like these nefarious plans to sleep around. So that happened, and then
got it.
I mean, we
that's
kind of
person 3, person 4.
And no, so person 4 never happened, but person 3 I ended up in a relationship with. And it was good going for a bit, and then we figured that, you know, we it wasn't working out, and so as a result, obviously, when the relationship thing didn't work out, then everyone was like, so
awkward.
let's just clearly this person's a problem. So like, you know, so it's not like it felt
how
bad.
How did that make you feel?
It didn't make me feel bad because I get where they were coming from. Obviously, when you're such a tight friend circle, and these people had been friends since they all moved to Bombay, like 10 years. And I will complete 10 years this January. That time it was my 6th year, 7th year or so. And so these people had been in Bombay, been friends for 10, 12 years at a stretch. So I get it. Like, you know, they would be a little protective of their equations and stuff, but I didn't feel bad about it. I didn't, I mean, I still, if I run into any of them, I'll be nice to them. I'll be cordial with them. I'll be civil to them. And maybe if they are open, I don't mind even hanging out with them. But it's not like I miss their presence in my life or something. So yeah, like that kind of shit. I've been.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think if as a collective I was like ever. Not really. No, as a collective, I feel no, not really. It's never happened. I'm sure it must feel fuck all. Because suddenly I can think of it, but this wasn't rejection. I once, you know how I have no filter. And even in no filter, I feel like I'm not stupid. But once I did end up saying something very stupid at a party to a very close friend of mine who we were as a group hanging. And I ended up asking something very stupid. And it offended that person. But because we are in a social setting, I don't think they brought it up. But that time, when someone else was at the party, I thought nothing. I thought nothing of what I asked or anything was anything. But when someone else at the party was, hey, do you know this person's angry with you because you said that thing? And then I was like, what? So then it became like hey, I'm so sorry. And it was you were a dick to ask me that. And then it took a while for me to remedy that, and we are still friends, by the way. But like, it just really, that time I felt like suddenly, oh my God, I am capable of not being myself sometimes, and I might say something very off-putting and totally my fault. But like, yeah, it was back then. I just felt like I was a little pariah for a while, and that did affect me quite a lot. Because again, it's so difficult, right, to like make friends. Nowadays, it's so difficult to like hold on to. Leave alone. It's easy to make friends. It's difficult to fucking continue friendships and work towards friendships. And so I don't know. I feel like so the burn is a little extra when those don't work out.
I agree. What about rejection from like family? Have there been family members who've and
let me get my
like
mommy issues book
no,
out.
but like your mom hasn't rejected you to the point that I don't want to talk to you. Like you're out. Like you're not part of my life. It's not that you can see her, but I'm saying rejection. Like your existence is rejected.
Yeah. I've had that level of maternal rejection. I know that in the end, it's just like it's like, oh, I'm sorry I said that and all of that. That she tries to make. But I've had that level of like not familial. I've never been. My father and my brother have been ridiculously supportive sometimes, and I was like, why do you all support me so much? But at least my mom, I feel like I've faced that level of like, no.
And so coming to the root of it, what do you think? Why is it? What is it? Do you attribute it to something within you? Or like, I'm not saying that that's your fault, but I'm saying, is there something that...
Why did she feel like that?
Yeah. What is it about you that triggers her?
It was nothing about. This is where therapy helped. Like over years, obviously, I asked this very question, right? Like, Why? What have I done for me to be thrashed the way I feel? What have I done for...
No, but why you and not your brother?
Oh, but it was a good old favoritism at play. I was a very mischievous child, and the more I felt like, see, that's the thing. These are such swathing, like such large things that over time I've kind of understood. So, for example, one of the things I know as a defense mechanism I developed growing up because of how tense things were between me and my mom was sense of humor. I suddenly, the more I got, my family life got fuck all, the funnier I got outside of my family. Which now, as an adult, I kind of understood. In fact, my therapist one gave such a great analogy. He said, if you're in an accident and your limb got chopped off, the first thing you notice is that it's not hurting as much as it should, because your brain immediately starts creating whatever chemicals to make you feel numb in that particular area, right? So even psychologically, we tend to do that, where if something is too like distressing psychologically, you might tend to do the opposite. And in my case, it was humor, which sent me, leave alone, that sent me in a different spin where I was like, am I funny at all if this had not happened to me? If I had not gone through years of trauma, would I be funny at all? But again, I have learned through therapy that, wow, it wasn't me. It was her and her issues and everything. But again, that's where it's so complex, right? Because when it's her issues, then I can't. What also happens a lot of times is everything as an adult, when things start going wrong in your life, it's easy to like then start blaming the person who fucked you up. Like, oh, because my mom was like this, that's why this is happening. Because so even to stop doing that also was an entire process of its own, where what, I forgive her. All I know now is I cannot give her a reaction. Like my main focus, because even till date, Shunetra, I'm not kidding. Like as of last week, there was a point where I knew she was trying to like irk me into, like pushing me against a wall to kind of, come on, let's fight, motherfucker. Although my mom wouldn't say motherfucker, but you know what I mean. Come on, let's this. But I did not give in. And as difficult as it was to not, I would have loved to just jump into it and like get down to it, and because that makes you feel alive. But now I feel like I'm at a point where, you know what? That's what. It's a you problem. It's not a me problem. I am Zen. I can't do this shit. I'm beyond this. Because I have had one lifetime's worth of rejection from you. And now I'm done pandering or appeasing or, like to anything. I'm done doing that. So that's if I'm actually, now I understand where your question came from, because yeah, that's the ultimate rejection that I have faced, if you ask me, in life, and that I had to get over, and that I like to believe that I have successfully gotten over.
That's great. Yeah.
Over years through, again, very expensive therapy.
But tell me,
any family?
Oh yeah, lots. So in Calcutta, I used to stay with my maternal grandparents, and so my maternal uncle and my grand aunt and uncle, who reside in USA and would visit very often, along with my maternal grandparents. At that point of time, I obviously used to blame myself all the time, because clearly something was wrong with my behavior, because I've always been the kind of child who would ask for an explanation. Like, you can't tell me just go and do something and
feedback.
Follow it. No, explain to me why I need to do it, why that's something that makes sense.
Sure.
And I will do it. But you can't not let me question you. And all of these people believed that just because they were older, they had a right to behave the way they did with me. I used to take it in my stride and think, there's something clearly like, I'm way too in your face with them. I'm way too rebellious. So the fault's with me. Now I look back and very clearly there's deep-seated emotional abuse because of the kind of things that they've said, the kind of things that they've done. Like stuff like on my birthday, I remember, like, that's the one day for a 16-year-old, imagine, for a 16-year-old, that's the one day that they would like to be happy and stuff like that. And there was, like, I was audibly howling. There was a fight and I was audibly, like, crying in my room. There was not a single effort to calm me down console me and make me feel like, you know what, today is just forget it. Let's make you feel better. Never, ever. And yeah, like, and the worst part is
but see, that's the thing. Now, would you still feel like, sure, you accept that it's deep-seated and that's where it stems for, but do you still feel like, oh, I could have done this differently, I could have done that differently?
I mean, if I had the power to leave that space earlier, and I would have left that space earlier. That's one of the reasons that pushed me to start earning and just like, leave, because I didn't want anyone else.
And where, sorry, if you don't mind, where were your parents and all?
My parents were in Ranchi, and there were a lot of times where I told them that there is all of this stuff happening. Are you not going to take a stand? Are you not going to say anything? They didn't. They said,
mother and father.
Yeah, like they said, they are taking care of you. And I said, that's when I realized that this is not going to go my way.
I will take care of me.
I will take care of me. You guys are not doing anything for me. So, and that's when I stopped eating at home. I stopped, and slowly, gradually, I moved out of the city. Before I moved out, I started paying when I moved to college, I said, you know what? I'm going to pay my own fees. You guys don't even need to touch my...
See, and can I tell you something? And if we are talking about rejection, my mom said the ultimate sentence to me, and I'm not trying to be sensational. This is a sentence that stuck with me so hard for so long that I cannot tell you how many hours were dedicated or how many problems in my life stemmed out of a sentence. But, 6-year-olds, right? Like, once in a fit of anger, my mom blurted out, I actually never wanted you. Your dad wanted to keep you. That's why now she's rejecting my existence. And again, this is, I can say this with a smile and all because now I find it funny. Because what am I going to do about it, right? Like, I'm here, I'm queer, what are you going to do? But she did say that. And that sentence, and one of the reasons I'm saying is because whenever I've spoken to a few friends, they're like, oh, my mom said that to me too. My mom said that to me. So again, if any listener feels like, fuck yeah, okay, I'm dealing with that level of toxicity or something like that has been said. Because imagine that is level of rejection. That's denying the person who gave birth to you on some level, denying that you shouldn't even have existed. Is a fucking
slap on the face.
No, I would appreciate a slap. I would appreciate a gunshot wound to my face as opposed to, because that sentence bounced in my head for years. Then because I'll tell you what also happens a lot of times. When the going gets tough, let's say I'm in one of my bipolar episodes and work is rough and life is rough and I am rough on myself and everything, then that sentence starts making sense. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it's easy, because that one sentence really fucked me up for so many years. But now I find it funny that she said that. And that's the level of anger. So it's her problem. It's her problem. Don't have a kid if you don't want to have
it. Yeah.
You had one, and there's a podcast now. He's a great person. He's loved by everyone, and that's all I need to know. So fuck that. But I'm just trying to say, like, that was probably, if I had to crystallize this entire, what's the kind of rejection that really hurt you, Farah? That did hurt me then. But now, every time I still think about that sentence sometimes, but now it's like harmless. The sentence is harmless. It doesn't do any damage. It doesn't do any harm. It just stays here because it kind of was such a big part of my psychology growing up that I had heard something like that. And again, I kind of mellowed the sentence out for this, but the word was abortion. Like she said, I wanted one, but you had not, and that's why you're here. And really, it's just like, it stuck with me for ages. And yeah, fuck her. Like,
okay, let's make things lighter.
Is there any mommy daddy issue?
But let's talk about rejection that you thought you deserve. I'll talk about it after you do.
No.
Because I have.
You have the best examples. You go for it. What? Rejection that you deserve?
Yes, I deserve it. Okay, so this is again a relationship. The relationship is in the rejection. But back in college, when I was at SIMC, I told I've said this on my podcast, and through the course of my 3rd and 4th semester, I got involved with someone in my batch. Actually, I won't give more details because this person's clearly still in the closet. So, Yeah. No, and so while, except for one friend of ours, no one else knew. Everyone, I was the only, like, living open queer person on the campus at that point of time. And so everyone knew of my existence. It's just that no one knew who is this mystery person that's leaving marks on, Shunetra's neck and all of that. So it was good while it was there and blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, post college, we ended up in different cities for whatever reason. We kind of didn't work out. And I don't want to get into why it didn't work out.
Sure.
The thing was that because he was, now after that, I was still friends with I'm still friends with a lot of people from college. He was friends with a lot of people from college. Now here's the thing. And I don't know the ethicality of what's right here, what's not. And I would it's good to have an audience on this. For me, I started talking about my relationship to some people, not on a big loudspeaker, and people figured that it was this person I'm talking about. And when they asked me, I didn't deny it. I said, yeah, but I'm not so sure this he's very open.
Got it.
And he came to know and thought I'm trying to out him everywhere.
Oh, yeah, you spoke about it.
And so his friend circle, he had this little clique, totally blocked me on social media and stuff. And I was like, it's not like I want your friendship even. We don't speak the same language. So you are just I was friends with you guys because of my association with him. And really, I don't care about you guys. But I think it was fair that they rejected me because, I was the evil person who was clearly messing around with their really good friend. And in their eyes, I get the optics of it, that there is this openly queer guy. Of course, there's a lot of deep-seated homophobia woven in it, because the optics was that there is this openly gay guy who's flamboyant, and in their flamboyance is trying to malign a close friend of ours who clearly shouldn't be maligned, and they would rather
James Charles.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying you are James Charles, but that's exactly what happened with him.
No, this is
okay.
Yeah. This is a relationship. This is a relationship for
that's what James Charles would say.
So it was this. I get where they were coming from. Not that they were right. It's just that they didn't have all the information. But I get it. I'm mature enough to understand incomplete stories and the optics that incomplete stories and versions of stories create. So, in fact, one really close, the one friend who knew about us, we hadn't spoken in ages. And then during the pandemic, we suddenly caught up. And I asked her that, I had a feeling, I tried getting in touch with her, but I had a feeling you were keeping your distance because there's always, in a breakup, one person gets the peace of mind and one person gets the friends. I got the peace of mind and he got the friends. So I always felt like you were on that side. So she said, you know what? Subconsciously, maybe. Now it's different because I've grown up, but I've grown more mature. And now we meet very often and now it's different. But yeah, but what about you?
Okay, now that you said all of this, yeah, I did have one moment where I was like, fuck, I was so irritating. And I don't blame him. But here's the deal. I was in an extremely toxic relationship with a girl for 3 years, almost gonna marry levels. And I specifically remember when I broke up with her, that relationship was so fuck all that I thought, you know what? Obviously, this girl thing is not being on me, and I've never actively, sure, I hook up with guys, I have sex with guys, I say I'm bisexual, but I've never dated a man. So I'm going to give it a good shot. And unfortunately, the light that shone on the guy that I was like, he's the one, I want to date him, he said no. He said no. And again, in the beginning of this episode, like I said, my first reaction was
this Planet Romeo?
Because I'm fat. No. This was, there used to be Birds of a Feather.
Yeah.
in Pune.
Yeah.
So I went for a movie screening, like, okay, I'm going to be a part of the community. And I went for a movie screening and I saw this boy and I was just mesmerized. And I was like, okay, anything. I want to hang out with this boy all the time. And he would come over and he would stay over. And I would have all these, like, not only like sexual, but also romantic feeling. I remember like tacky ass fucking things. Like once he was at my place and he went for a shower. And he was singing in the shower, and I recorded it like him singing. Sorry, let me please specify. Yeah, I know how that sounds. And I would keep listening to him singing in that badly recorded Sony Ericsson phone. I would keep listening to him sing. Like that's the level of sudden infatuation, I'd say. Now I don't think it was like love or anything. And I was very quick again to make it about me, which is because I'm fat. That's why, obviously, this boy saying no, even though he never said that sentence, he just was like, no, I don't see you that way. And you're a good friend. And he did you're a friend, he friend zoned me basically. But I was having such a tough time, like, because also I had been in so many relationships by then already. And I had hooked up with so many guys that I felt like I had the ball rolling in a way where I, in a cocky way, felt like, oh, everyone's going to say yes to me because I'm amazing, you know? So why would... So when this was the first no, I got so whiny, and I remember the length of my WhatsApp messages then, and I would like see Tumblr posts and relate to them that time. And I was like fucking irritating. I would send him like poems and this, and which I guess is sweet to someone else, but I just felt like I kind of hit the gas to the pedal and like went for it. Also, because I made it about my weight, can I tell you something? I was 108 kilos when I met him. And also something parallelly happened in my life that time. I started smoking pot for the first time. I went from a recreational to a, okay, pot is a way of life now. Like wake up pot, it's all day baked, basically. So, I don't know, I found some joy in walking suddenly. And literally, I went from 108 to like 85, 80 in a span of like 3-4 months. I walked it off. But all in my head, if you ask me right now, I literally feel it was because I was so deeply hurt that this person rejected me because of my weight. I made it about that. Now I know it was a couple of factors that played into it. But yeah, man, if all of this happened again, I totally don't blame. Okay, and I totally don't blame him. And can I tell you something? I'm still in touch with him. I have zero feelings, zero this. I don't care if he responds or all of that. But fast forward to like 5-6 years after this happened, he was in Bombay. And he was like, oh, I'd love to hang and all of that. I was like, yeah, sure. And that time I was living at a friend's house. My house was getting painted or something. So I was staying at a friend's house. I was like, okay, sure. You know what? I've reached a point where I can hang out with you without wanting anything from you. Now the thing is, he wanted to go out drinking. We go out drinking. I am not drinking. I'm sober as fuck. But he's drinking. And right enough, we end up back at my friend's place who had gone to work. So it's just us. And things started, for the first time, it's like I felt like, oh, he's looking at my lips and talking a lot, which is dangerous, right? Because like I said, I was so infatuated by him. I might be misreading the entire situation. Like, is there sexual energy in the air? I don't know. But long story short, he was putting it out there. We kind of started making out, and it was gonna like escalate. And the doorbell rang, and my friend came back home from work. So
saved by the bell.
No. In fact, I find it funny now that I wanted it so badly. And again, it wasn't just sexual, but some part of it was working out. That yearning that I had for him was suddenly happening. My hand was right up his shirt, with tongue on tongue. It was intense. So I know it was going to lead to something. And my friend just came back home from work, and it just ended there. Like after that, in fact, I even visited his, when I was, he's from the north, like that. He's in Darjeeling. And when me and my boyfriend had gone there, I was like, hey, do you want to meet? And we hung out. Nothing. So yeah, I guess now in retrospect, see, that's the thing, right, Shanidra? I feel like I could have summed all of this up as it's your response that's always going to matter. We've said this a million times. Like, rejection will everywhere, whether it's a job, whether it's a friend, whether it's a lover, you'll face it. And the worst kind of rejection happens in relationships, where it's daily rejection. But
I also I mean, I know it's very dangerous to say this, but it's important that we come to a point in life where we don't just brush it off completely as, oh, so this wasn't my fault at all. I think we need to be self-aware enough to see whether we've had any part in it. If we had a part in it, be self-aware and let's work on ourselves. Because, there's a lot of like just this pseudo positivity talk out there that's about not taking responsibility at all. Like, don't care what people say about you. No, sometimes do care what people say about you. Make sure they're the right people. That's about it. But this whole idea that, oh, fuck the universe. No,
don't be a dick, basically.
No, and no more than it should. Of course, don't be a dick. But also, let's be self-aware of how our actions are affecting other people. Are we saying the right things? Are we doing the right things?
Which is why, like I said, I instantly knew how I was piney and like clingy, and I was in so many ways. I was like, I don't blame this person at all for not wanting to be with me.
And in my case, where I in fact called him to say, are you seriously thinking that I'm trying to out you? I've had a conversation, an intimate conversation with someone that has reached you, but it had reached a point where he was just so freaked out by the possibility of him being outed that he just was not ready to listen to me. But and I was like, you know what? And after that, I've tried, but I'll only try to a certain point. After that, it's just,
you make
I
peace
get
with
it. I made peace with it. Yeah.
And now, if you had to say now, like at this age, rejection, how do you process, how do you deal with it? Like any form of like, because that's easy, right? The older you get, like it's so easy to like,
it's easy. And for me, it's either it's basically an exercise in self-awareness, like I was saying. It's either me figuring out whether I did something right or wrong, and it takes a serious amount of objective. I don't try it every single day. My first instinct is to let it be. I wrap it up and like just when I'm ready, when I'm in the right frame of mind, like fresh from therapy the next 1 week or so, that's when I open the box and I assess it. I analyze it. Did I do something which maybe I shouldn't have done? If I find something like that, then I will stand up and apologize. I will rectify that from my end. That's my reaction today.
No, now I don't get affected at all. Like keeping in mind what you just said. Like obviously I'm self-aware, but I'm self-aware to a point where I know that I don't actually do anything to deserve to get rejected. You know what I mean? I am who I am. You like who I am. Thank you. Welcome. You know, it's like that. Now it's not like if someone doesn't like me for who I am, how I am, the way I am and all of that. It's beyond that because this I feel right now is the best version of me.
Absolutely.
So like, bhai, pasand hai to le lo, varna mat le lo, aisa vibe.
You know, there's such little.
In fact, I was tested very recently. Tested in terms of like this. Oh, do I handle rejection well? Which is, I've been chatting with someone for ages, and he had been on 2-3 dates, and they were great. But somehow it never formulated into something sexual because we've always been in different cities and all of that. And finally, he was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to come. We're going to hang out. I'm going to stay with you and all of that. And suddenly in my head, that motor started running that it's going to be sex. Like, you know, because, and here's the deal also. He's one of those few people where it's never got sexual. Like even our conversation. Otherwise, it's always like, you know, some level of like, oh yeah, sexual, sexting, whatever. But it did not. So I did find myself thinking about it a lot that, oh my God, if it's, will I have to make the move? Will he make the move? What if he doesn't make the move? Because I'm very fond of him. But again, I'm at an age now where I was like, wait, Farhad, this doesn't have to be sexually driven. Like that, it turns into sex will not define how good the hanging out was. You actually spend so much time chatting with this boy. And even if it's just that when he comes, so go with the flow. Go with the flow. And I went with the flow and we did end up hooking up. But I know that I had that moment of where I was being like, what if he says no? Because I wanted it. I did want it to turn into something intimate. I did want it to be that. So long story short, I think I'm good on rejection.
And I think there's this narrative that's not that's not built hard enough, strong enough, wide enough in this universe that you get as a package. You get more interesting and more attractive and more worthy with age. And that's just something that people, it's just, and what ends up happening is people realize it and people don't talk about it because it's not worth talking about, because you realize it. I don't care about other people knowing about it. But it needs to be said. It needs to be put out there that with age, the moment you stop dwelling on these things, it just gets easier. It just gets simpler. And like it just...
Now, when it's a job related, anything like, let's say I don't get a job, or even something as trivial as I freelance, right? So sometimes I present 3 to 4 ideas for a certain thing. And if none of them work, I kind of, that I'd say I still struggle with, like, because, hey, bitch, I have experience. And, there's that kind of cockiness that comes with it. But again, it's all good, man.
I try and get a sense of what if there's an idea that didn't go through. What's the reason why it didn't go through? Because for me, it's important to know that.
Sure.
And if the reason's not good enough, then I just slot it as, okay, clear. Like, I mean, this person didn't know where I was coming from. But sometimes the reasons just make sense. And I get it. I completely get
but
it.
Again, we are in advertising. The kind of,
you hold your ideas close. And
Like right now, I'm in Bombay for a little gig, and like there is no brief to work off and
oh god, I literally did a class on today. I did a 1-hour session on what is a good brief versus what is a bad brief.
But everybody's a headless chicken, and then they know what they don't know what they want.
They know what they will reject eventually, but they won't give you a clear creative
they won't give you a clear idea what they want, but they definitely know what they don't want. And I'm like, like what the fuck, make up your minds. And in fact, right now I was telling one of my friends this, but the worst thing, when you go with creative ideas, especially if it's a no, it's great. I'm fine with no. But when they tell you, oh, why don't you merge idea 1 and idea 2 and idea 3?
Also, what pisses me off is if I've given you 3 ideas as options. I've given you options, right? Pick one and stop criticizing the others. I've given you 3 options.
I'm in a
go with it.
Marry this idea with that idea and then add in this, and then it will be. And I'm like, sure, you want a fucking khichdi? As long as you're paying me, I'll fucking do it. So what am I going to say? But that's that. Yeah, otherwise, good on rejection. Good on rejection. You're doing good. You're doing well. And if you're a listener and you are not dealing well with rejection,
grow older. You will get there.
It's also one of those things that is designed to make you feel better, not make you feel better, but it's designed to make you better over time. It will make you a better person. Rejection does make you better. I sound like one of those hustle culture people, but it is true. It is true. You will figure out a way around the no's in your life. Like all the no's that come your way, you'll figure a way around.
Absolutely. All right. Let's quickly take a quick short break, and then we'll be back with our recommendations for the week.
Done.
Eventually, you'll see the end of your childhood.
Get accustomed to womanhood.
Enjoy the experience of sisterhood.
Might get to wifehood.
Or not. Choose motherhood.
Or not. You'll learn to define your personhood.
Earn a livelihood.
Change the neighborhood.
And get rid of the falsehood that life post-academia is easy.
So join me, Natasha.
And me, Ayushi.
On a journey from station starting point.
To station, what now?
Next station, Pudin station. And hopefully, Agla station, adulthood.
Fresh episodes out every Thursday.
All right. So, what are we recommended this week?
I have 2 quick recommendations. Both shows.
Start with one, na? Like just one.
I don't know. Sometimes I feel we consume things in bulk. Sure. So, kya hota hai? Ek hota hai na, then the other things fall into
Okay, get to it.
There. Okay. One is Lula Rich, the mini on Amazon Prime. It's a 3-part mini series. It's not true crime, but it's about a couple who starts this company about like a leggings company. They make leggings and spandex pants and all. And how they ended up setting up a pyramid scheme around these leggings and ended up like becoming a multi-billion-dollar industry, okay? And how they ended up fucking everyone in the process. So it's like, pyramid scheme documentaries are a genre of their own now.
Yeah.
LuLaRich is fucking amazing. I absolutely loved it. And quickly, I'm going to do only Murders Left in the Building, just for the fan service. I'm the biggest fucking Steve Martin fan, Martin Short fan ever since I was a kid. I love Selena Gomez. If you ask me a lot of times, who do you love? Beyonce, Taylor Swift, whatever. I'm going to pick Selena Gomez. So to suddenly see her with two of my favorite, like Father of the Bride people, it's refreshing. It's refreshing. And it's kind of modern. First, I thought it might be a little outdated because Steve Martin has also written it. So I thought the humor and all, but it's very contemporary. It's about podcasting and it's a whodunit and it's all good. It's fun.
Nice.
So these are my two recommendations for the week.
All right.
What's yours?
Okay, so I watched this film. It's a very, it's not like a masterpiece by itself. It's called After the Dark. But the premise is so interesting. The premise is a philosophical exercise. There's this teacher and a class of 20 students. And he's going through this philosophical exercise with them on what if the end of the world is impending. And
it is or isn't.
What if it is, and there is a bunker, and only 10 of you can go inside the bunker, and he assigns everyone different roles, and the roles have something to do with their talents. Like, for example, one of them is a poet, one of them is really good in terms of, physical fitness. So they
hunter-gatherer
will be a soldier. So 3 to 4 rounds, through the course of 3 to 4 rounds, they go through a ringer where, in the first round, they obviously go through this idea of just people who matter, like, the providers, like there will be a soldier, there will be a scientist, there will be a doctor, and none of them work out. And spoiler alert, the only combination that ends up working.
I want to watch it.
So
it sounds a little like Squid Game, honestly, but philosophical.
A lot more. And so through trials
This is a movie?
It's a movie, After the Dark. And through permutations and combinations, the right combination just defies the regular. Stop searching for it right now on Google.
Yeah.
I said stop searching for it right now on Google. I can see the light on your face.
I'll just say, because so many times I just type it in a window and keep it because I will suddenly,
Yeah, so I don't want to spoil it, but like over the course, it defies, the final combination defies a lot of our beliefs in terms of what a society might need as its bare bones to survive and thrive. So it's interesting. It's an interesting treatise on what role do different professions play in the survival and of a society, and it's got a satisfying end. So I kind of like that. And over the course,
is it on any streaming platform?
No, it's
torrential rainfall.
Yes. And over the course of the weekend, there was a lot that I binged after. I had a weekend to myself after almost 3 to 4 weeks where I was by myself and no work. So there was this film called Wolfwalkers, this animated film called Wolfwalkers.
Oh my God, I've seen it.
It is just the most beautiful animated film that you can possibly. It's by the same studio that made Secret of Kells, Song of the Sea. Just beautiful animation style and lovely storytelling.
And 2D, like not even like
2D. Yeah. So
they're French, right? Production-wise.
I
also feel it's Apple's foray into animated. I think it was produced by Apple.
Was it? I don't know. I knew that it's an indie studio that does this.
Loved it.
I think, as far as I know, it's a Welsh studio. As far as I know.
Yeah. I remember when I watched it. I watched it quite a long time ago.
It released a year back or so. Yeah.
I remember after ages thinking, I should have been stoned for this movie.
It was very pretty, very beautiful.
It was pretty, trippy, all of it. And it's not Studio Ghibli at all, but the attention to detail was astounding,
beautiful.
Intricate. Which also was Secret of Kells was beautiful.
Exactly. And so it has a lot of the mythology and legend of the Celtic
and in terms
world.
Of the story, it's a little Disney.
Cute, it is cute. It's Disney cute. So those are my 2 recommendations for the week.
Okay.
All right.
It's time.
All right. So we'll see you and hear you next week. And so
We never hear you. As in, we hear you, but only when you want to complain to us about Taylor Swift being amazing. Kindly keep it in the comments, bitch. Dave Chappelle did not say that.
Yeah, like everyone has their choices, so I'm not going to apologize for dissing Taylor Swift. So
yeah. Done.
All right.
Thanks, Sinead.
Thank you so much.
I'll see you next week. I'll see everyone next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcast. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.
A wise man once said, traveling, it makes you speechless, then turns you into a storyteller.
Well, listen to such travel stories and experiences exploring India on the Musafir Stories with us, Saif and Faiza.
Catch us on the IVM website, app, or wherever you get your podcasts from.